begin with serious stuff. I began with these jokes because, again, it's problematic for some of you, I hope, but serious stuff that I want to do. I want to begin with the paradox of superego, long ago noted by Freud. The more we obey the superego commandment, the more we feel guilty. That's the basic paradox of superego. You know, the more you obey, the more you are guilty. This paradox holds also when we follow Lacan and read superego as an injunction to enjoy. Enjoyment is an impossible real. You cannot ever fully attain it, and this failure makes us feel guilty. A series of situations that characterize today's society exemplify perfectly this type of superego logic. Ecology, political correctness, poverty, up to indebtedness in general. For example, and the example is nature, ecology, does the predominant ecological discourse not address us as a priori guilty, indebted to Mother Nature, under the constant pressure of the ecological superego agency which addresses us in our individuality? What did you do today to repay your debt to nature? Did you put all newspapers into a proper recycle bin? And all the bottles of beer or cans of Coke? Did you use your car where you could or should have used a bike or some means of public transport? Did you use air conditioning instead of just opening wide the windows, and so on? The ideological, I think we should reject this logic. The ideological stakes of such individualization are easily discernible. I get lost in my own self-examination instead of raising much more pertinent global questions about our entire industrial civilization. This is why it is in a way quite justified that I feel guilty. Following the injunctions to recycle and so on ultimately means that I follow rituals which allow me to postpone doing something that would really address the causes of ecological crisis. Let me go even a step further here. The burning of the Amazon forests cannot but trigger alarm. Are we really heading towards a collective suicide? By destroying the Amazon rainforests, Brazilians are, so we are told, killing the lungs of our earth. However, if we want to confront seriously threats to our environment, what we should avoid are precisely such quick extrapolations which fascinate our imagination. I remember when first there was a talk, at least 30 years ago, in Germany especially, about Waldsterben, the dying of forests. It was global fascination in the media. Like, the idea was, and they were obvious, that around 2000, at least 2000 then, Europe will be without forests, and so on and so on. Now, according to some data, which are to be taken seriously, on our Earth there are more forests than at any point in the 20th century on our Earth. Now, let me be precise here. I'm not saying ecological crisis is not to be taken seriously. It's mega serious. I'm just saying that this fascination with catastrophe, which immobilizes you, is one of the ways to avoid really confronting the crisis. How we avoid it? Precisely by surrendering to this fear. Ecology of fear, I think, has all the chances of developing into the predominant form of ideology of global capitalism, a new opium for the masses, replacing the declining religion. The rejection of anthropocentrism, advocated by deep ecologists, is very suspicious. There is a deep hypocrisy in it. What all the talk about how we, humanity, pose a threat to the life on and of the earth really amounts to is our worry about our own fate. Earth in itself is indifferent. Even if we destroy life on it, It will just be one, not even the greatest of catastrophes that befell it. When we worry about environment, we really worry about our own environment. We want our own good and safe life. So even when we profess the readiness to assume our responsibility for ecological catastrophes, this can be a tricky stratagem to avoid the true dimensions of the threat. There is something deceptively reassuring in this readiness to assume the guilt for the threats to our environment. We like to be guilty since if we are guilty, then it all depends on us. We pull the strings of the catastrophe so we can also save ourselves simply by changing our lives. What is really difficult for us to accept is that we are reduced to a passive role of an impotent observer who can only sit and watch what his fate will be. To avoid such a situation, we are prone to engage in frantic, obsessive rituals. Recycle old paper, buy organic food, whatever, just so that you can be sure that we are doing something, making our contribution. I think some ecologists often act like a soccer fan who supports his team in front of a TV screen at home, shouting and jumping from his seat as if acting in a superstitious belief that this will somehow influence the outcome. There is another dimension. I developed this in my books repeatedly, where I distrust common ecology. If you look at it closely, it's often this predominant ecology. It's really not about doing something for nature, but making us feel good to be part of a large ideological project of saving Earth and so on, and so on. This is I often repeat it, maybe you know it, provocative point. Some of my friends like to buy those half-rotten organic apples and not the beautiful genetically manipulated ones. But then some of them were open enough towards me. I asked them, do you really believe that that half-rotten apple is any better? Because my dream is that, a farmer takes the nice apples out, then what remains, the half-rotten apples, he sells them at a double price as organic. And you know what most of them tell me? They tell me, I know I have doubts, but it makes me feel good that I'm doing something for Mother Nature. Don't underestimate this. Don't underestimate this dimension. Let me go on. Another thing. Did you notice how capitalism itself made out of being green a new market niche? That's an old example of mine. Maybe some of you know it, but it's still my favorite. Now, it's no longer to such an extent present. In Starbucks, at least 10, 15 years ago, it was all about green. They claimed, for example, openly manipulating us. Our cappuccino is 10 cents more expensive than down the street. But 2% of all that we earn goes to some starving children in Somalia, forests in I don't know where. And this is an ingenious trick. Why? Because usually we are split as consumer. I buy all the decadent stuff, but then I feel bad, I try to do something for common welfare. But here, this is for me the final step of the commodity logic. You include your social responsibility into the price of the commodity. It's like, I don't know, $1.50. Now it's higher, I think. Cappuccino and then 20 cents, so you can stay calm and so on and so on. Let me not get lost in this direction, let me go on. Today, ecology tends to perceive nature itself as the limit of our expansion. It enjoins us, humans, to renounce our hubris, our ruthless exploitation of nature. Now that God or tradition can no longer play the role of the highest limit, nature takes over this role. But what kind of nature will this be? Even when we imagine global warming, we still picture the outcome of global warming as a new stability with regular, repeatable weather patterns. However, recent researches find it more probable that Earth's climate leads to a chaos, true mathematical chaos, in which there is no equilibrium, no repeatable patterns. A chaotic climate would have seasons that change wildly from decade to decade, or even year to year. Some years would experience sudden flashes of extreme weather, while others would be completely quiet. Such an outcome is not only catastrophic for our survival, it also runs against our most basic notion of nature, that of repeatable pattern of seasons. As such, it reminds us, or me at least, of what the great Marxist George Lukács, in his classical book History and Class Consciousness, pointed out. Nature is a social category. That is to say, what we perceive as nature is always overdetermined by a social contact. So while, of course, everything there is nature, we are part of nature, the obverse also holds at the level of our understanding. Nature is a cultural category. What strikes us as unnatural is always socially determined. Are we entering a post-anthropocentric era? A BBC report on the 2022 Venice Biennale, we read that its curator, Cecilia Alemani, and incidentally, if there is a thing I really hate, they are the worst of today's ideology, I think, are these art biennales. Because it's a crazy gap between how an institution actually functions and its ideological legitimization. Did you notice how, to appear at a biennale, you should always, these programmatic manifestos are utterly anti-capitalist. We are racist, colonialist still, we are destroying nature, we are exploiting Africa. Whatever you want, everything is there, and they even usually include themselves, like even our biennale is part of the capital self-reproduction, but it goes on. I mean, nothing changes. Obviously, today we are at an extremely cynical stage of the functioning of ideology. And I'm tempted, but I developed this elsewhere, to go on to the end. It's not only that it doesn't matter if you criticize the ruling ideology, the system goes on. It is that in some deeper sense, criticizing it makes the system function all the better.